Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, we're breaking down the Wolves' dominant win over the Indiana Pacers on Saturday night. Anthony Edwards' impressive performance, Karl-Anthony Towns' 40-point performance, and all the stuff the role players did. Just enough defense in this game as the Wolves beat another good team that, yes, was shorthanded, but still a fantastic Wolves performance. We'll break the whole thing down. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Happy Monday, everybody. It's a Victory Monday. This is pretty much a post-game podcast from Saturday night's win over the Pacers. Such a good game, and lots to talk about, really, in this one. A really kind of strong all-around. Well, I don't know. It's actually kind of weird if you dig into the numbers a little bit. The Wolves lost a lot of categories in the box score, but the offense was so overwhelmingly good when it absolutely needed to be to put this game away. And Ant and Cat were the best players on the floor by head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Like, they were the best players on the floor, period, for both teams. So I want to talk about that. We'll also talk about some of the areas where the Wolves struggled a little bit, but it was kind of papered over by Cat and Ant's performance. So we'll talk about that here on the show. A big thank you here, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Locked On Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow an X, and that's at Locked On T Wolves, and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right, so the headline obviously is Karl-Anthony Towns dropping 40, Ant getting 37 on the night of the release of the AE1s with Adidas, the big night at the arena at Target Center with the T-shirts, and his brother performing at halftime, and the whole thing starts out slow, ends up with 37, and was 7 of 8, I believe, on threes until he was just launching to try and get to 40 points at the end of the game, understandably. But anyway, yeah, the headline is the 77 combined points between the Wolves, two of their three superstars, 77 points for those guys, 77 of the Wolves, 127. Like, that's the headline, right? Now, we know the circumstances. I think it's important to put it all out there. Indiana, second night of a back-to-back, didn't fly in until Saturday afternoon because of mechanical troubles for their plane, on their plane, which was in D.C. Friday night. So never actually went to the hotel, went straight from the airport to the arena and then back to the airport after the game. The Wolves, had the night off, were resting at home, and no Jaden McDaniels. Well, I shouldn't say that. Jaden McDaniels played in the first half, left due to the tailbone contusion, which he initially injured the other night, and so they had half a game from Jaden McDaniels, otherwise healthy. The Pacers, no Tyrese Haliburton on the second night of a back-to-back, got injured on Friday night. So the Wolves are taking on a team that was above 500 coming in, 13-10, the league's best offense for most of the season, historically efficient for stretches this year. The Pacers offense has been with Haliburton on the floor. So yeah, Wolves have the rest advantage. They have the advantage of the other team's best player being out. But remember, this is what we did all last season. The Wolves would lose these games, or at least win them barely against teams they should be beating. Not a problem this year. And that matters, right? Like, over the course of an 82-game season, you can only play the teams that are in front of you, right? And what's the alternative, right? You go 500 in these games, you look back and say what could have been, or you go like 4-8 or whatever the Wolves did last year against the worst 4 teams in the league, or worst 6 teams in the league. And then you say what could have been, we're now a 7 seed instead of a 5 seed or a 4 seed even. What's the alternative? You have to beat the teams that are in front of you. And then you also stack these other impressive wins, the overtime win over Boston, the OKC victory, the Denver win, like the Knicks win. Like, these wins are all impressive for, various reasons. And then you're still beating good teams without their best players are still good teams, right? By definition, they're well coached in almost every case. They've got a deep roster in most cases. You're not facing teams that have nobody, right? At least, the Wolves haven't played the Pistons yet, right? Like, they played the Spurs twice, I guess. But so all that to say, this is still impressive, winning this game by 18. And this was more, it was weird. It wasn't like, the Wolves did make some big defensive plays in this game. And I think Kat had a quote after the game, something to the effect of like, hey, we turned this game with our defense. Yes, the Wolves absolutely had some stretches of really strong defense, especially in that third quarter, which you've seen the Wolves do so frequently. But this was more about the offense just overwhelming Indiana. And the Pacers have a bad defense. Like, we know that about Indiana. It's just, they're just not a good defensive team. And of course, missing Haliburton matters, on offense, but on both ends of the floor. And, the Pacers came into the game, 28th in defensive efficiency, defensive rating, according to Basketball Reference. They were second in offensive rating. They've been first for most of the season, as I mentioned. But this game, the Wolves used their middle of the pack offense, which is what it's been this season, mostly lower middle of pack, mostly between like 16th and 20th in terms of efficiency. They came out and just completely overwhelmed Indiana. And it was most of the third quarter. Ant got going in the second. The first quarter, the Wolves had 23 points. That was it. And Cat had 16 of them in the opening quarter. Cat had 16 of 23. The Wolves were up 3 after the first frame. And then Indiana won the second quarter by a point. The Wolves were up 2 at halftime. Ant made a nice bucket late in the second quarter to give the Wolves a 2-point lead at halftime. And the defense wasn't very good in the middle stages of this game for Minnesota, or at least in the second quarter. And then all of a sudden in the third quarter, they turned it on defensively. And it was both ends of the floor. The third quarter was an absolute onslaught. It's what we've seen for so much of the season. The Wolves have the second best third quarter net rating of any team in the league. And I'm sure actually after this game, it wouldn't surprise me if it was inching closer to first. They just completely, I keep using the word overwhelmed. That's the best way to say it, on both ends of the floor. The defense was swarming. The Wolves ended up with only 4 block shots on the night, but I'd be willing to bet that at least 2 or 3 of those were in the third quarter. It was Rudy. It was Cat. It was some smothering perimeter defense. Just, the Wolves did a good job on the glass in the third quarter. And that's what kind of initiated then the continuation of an avalanche of offense that started in the second quarter. So this game was more about the offense than it was the defense. It's important to remember the Pacers, even without Haliburton, they're still a good offensive team. And the Wolves just kind of said, no, you're not doing this tonight in the third quarter. Overwhelmed them offensively. The Wolves get a 16-point lead going to the fourth quarter and put it away very early in the fourth. I guess really middle stages, but it was over early in the fourth. Rudy was on the bench at the time, never had to come back in the game. And it was suddenly in all phases, the Wolves were dominant for like stretches of the second, all of the third, and early in the fourth. Garbage time actually skewed a bunch of these stats. And I'm going to rattle off some of the surprising stats for the box score. If you didn't watch this game, you'd look at it and you scratch your head and say, how did the Wolves win this game by 18? Because the Pacers won, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories of the box score, whatever that I'm going to talk through. But this is also where, like, say, Cleaning the Glass, which is a website that pulls out garbage time stats for at least for the season-long statistics and metrics. That's really helpful because garbage time, even though the Pacers still lost by 18, the Wolves were up by 20 plus, and then the Pacers got a bunch of offensive rebounds, and the Wolves turned it over a couple of times late, trying to get cute with the ball and trying to, get Ant to 40 points. So those stats are all a bit skewed because of the end of the fourth quarter. But still, it's true that the Wolves were only up by a bucket at halftime. This wasn't a complete dominance. This was just a third quarter that ended the game. Just like ended it right there was the third quarter. And that's how impressive and how quickly this team can go from 0 to 60 on both ends of the floor. They're not simply a quick strike offense. They're a quick strike defense. They can just say, hey, we're going to lock down. You guys aren't going to score a bucket. You're at least not going to score easily. And, we're going to make it count on the other end too. And that's what was so impressive about this performance. A lot of energy in the arena, the big night for Ant, having the rest advantage, having the health advantage, all that stuff kind of culminated in a massive third quarter for Minnesota. I want to talk about the box score, some of the stats that stuck out to me in this one. So just some of the weird things. We'll get into individual studs and duds here in a minute. I also want to talk about a stat. We'll probably dig into this a little bit more on maybe middle of the week, maybe Wednesday. But an interesting Cleaning the Glass stat that somebody pointed out on Twitter or on X, and I'll shout them out here. But I want to point that out because that can get lost in all this discourse about the Wolves, beating up on bad teams or shorthanded teams, etc. Their offense and their defense is performing really well against the best that opponents have to offer in each of those categories as well. And so I want to point out that stat on Cleaning the Glass here next. And that's what we'll do here the rest of the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Basketball season now, we're about 25 games or so through the season, past the quarter pole, inching towards the third season mark. You can pick combo projections across football and basketball. In football now, you're getting games Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in the NFL. It's the Specials League at PrizePicks is a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you could take LeBron and you could take Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus receptions and take more than or less than on that number. You can also take advantage of the reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform that has an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for that first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so if you look at the box score in this game, and I'm going to throw up a graphic on YouTube, the Wolves won this thing by 18. Yes, they won the field goal battle, the 3-point battle. We'll talk about that in a minute. But look at this. The Wolves were a -2 in the turnover category. They were a -4 in the rebounds category. They committed one more foul than Indiana in this game. They were also a -14 in fast break points. They were a -20 points in the paint. The Wolves gave up 70 points in the paint in this game to Indiana. 70 points in the paint. Let me say that again. -20 points in the paint. -14 in fast break points, a -2 in turnovers, a -4 in rebounds. They committed one more foul. All those categories working against the Wolves. A lot of it was garbage time. Some of the sloppiness was early in the game. The Wolves defense was okay in the first quarter. The offense was just it was just a disjointed first quarter, as we've seen so often from the Wolves, but their defense is good enough that they can also force the opponent to be a bit disjointed early in the game too. And it worked out. They kind of mucked it up. Wolves weren't crisp offensively. Ant missed his first 4 shots from the field. Looked a lot like the Ant that went 3 of 19 on Thursday against Dallas. And eventually they got it together, and some of these stats improved middle of the game. They're in a good spot in a lot of these categories, and then they finished the game in garbage time. The Pacers pushed back on a lot of it. But what was so impressive about this game was the performances from Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards. And I'll spend a little time on them now. We'll, of course, mention them in studs and duds at the end. But I mentioned earlier, Cat had 16 in the first quarter, and he scored in every which way. It was a lot of post dominance, really kind of, took Obi Toppin's lunch money over and over again. Obi Toppin had a terrible game, and it only ended up playing 17 minutes. And the Pacers tried guarding him one-on-one in the post. Cat scored multiple times in a row. Then as the game wore on, the Pacers said, all right, we'll do what some other teams have done to some level of success in the past against Cat. We'll front him with a small, and we'll bring backline help to kind of double him on the catch, right? If you lob it over the small, we'll try and pinch him with the big from the backside and then collapse with the guard that was fronting him and try and double him and force a bad pass. Well, Cat was he was being decisive. Remember a couple years ago, I think it was 2 seasons ago, when Ant said something after the game about how when Cat it was a really astute thing for 19, 20-year-old at the time, Ant, who wasn't even a star at that point, to say, which was, hey, when Cat goes fast, he's unstoppable. When he thinks too much, he didn't say this, but teams can take the ball from him. They can double him. They can make him make bad passes. Cat was decisive again in this game. He was catching the ball and going. He was catching the ball and swinging it. He was catching the ball, one dribble, bucket. But at the same time, not rushed. It wasn't the frenzied, stray voltage Cat that we talked about so much before, where it's like, all right, I got to go quick because they're going to double. I got to run somebody over and get an offensive foul here. I got to throw the ball out of bounds, trying to throw a softball pass to the opposite corner, or, try and fire a pass to a cutter. It was quick, but intelligent decision-making from Karl-Anthony Towns in this game. And he only turned it over, 3 times in the game. One of them was late. And it was, again, Globetrotter stuff late in this game. So really effectively only 2 turnovers if you take that one out. 40 points on 25 shots, only shot 3 threes in this game. And he scored actually quite a bit in the mid-range in this one. And he shot a lot of mid-range the other night against Dallas. He made 3 one-legged Dirk fadeaways in Dallas. But he was also in the post a lot. Like if you look at his shot distribution from this game, and I'm going to see if I can pull up real quick here, but his shot distribution from the game, like he was shooting a lot of mid range, but he was also in the post a lot and just less outside the arc. He shot, let's see, he shot 5 non-paint twos in this game and 3 3-pointers. So that means he attempted 8 non-paint shots of his 25. So he shot the ball 17 times inside the paint. Anthony Edwards did, or excuse me, Karl-Anthony Towns did. And yet the Wolves still were outscored by 20 in the paint. They still only had 50 points in the paint as a team, which actually 50 is not a terrible number. It's just they played against a team that had 70 points in the paint in this game. So Karl-Anthony Towns' shot distribution, impressive. Like you'd love 5 non-paint twos is kind of a lot, but he made 2 of them, and it's Cat's efficient from the mid-range. He's actually historically a better mid-range jump shooter than Anthony Edwards. I know Ant's been a lot better lately, but the shot distribution for Cat was impressive to me. I didn't really have a problem with it. Cat and Ant combined to attempt 48 of the Wolves' 86 shots. So what is that? That's more than half of the Wolves' shots in this game were attempted by Ant and Cat together. Nobody else individually attempted more than 8, and that was Nas. Besides Nas, only 2 players had more than 5 shot attempts in this game. So Cat was fantastic all over the floor, rebounded the ball well, had 5 offensive rebounds in this game, 4 assists, 3 steals, a couple of blocks for Cat. Was a plus 18 in 35 minutes. Ant started 0 for 4, finished with, a couple bad turnovers and a couple bad shot attempts because he was trying to get to 40 points. But he had 37 on 23 shots, ultra efficient from Anthony Edwards, and he only attempted 2 free throws in this game. That's right. Ant shot the ball 23 times and only got to the line twice. Now, there was, again, kind of a lot of mid-range, and there was a lot of 3-pointers in this game. Ant shot 4 non-paint twos. He was 1 of 4 on non-paint twos. But in the paint, by my count, he was 6 of 8 shooting in the paint. And then outside the arc, he was 7 of 10. And shot distribution, fine. Like, you'd love him to get to the line more often. This was actually, I thought, a well-officiated game. It was very clean. There were each team had identical free throw attempts, 16 attempts, 13 makes for both teams, 31 total personal fouls called. Like, this was a cleanly officiated game. I'm not complaining at all about Ant only getting 2 free throws based on the officiating. I just would love to see, of those 4 or 5 non-paint twos, you'd love to see 2 or 3 of them come in the paint, and hopefully he gets, 1 or 2 more foul calls. He did have one that he tried to throw down a dunk, and it was a good block. I think it was Bruce Brown. And ultimately on a challenge, the Pacers got it overturned, and they said it wasn't a foul, which was the correct call. But, Ant, the free throw rate has kind of come down a little bit for Ant of late. You'd love to see that pump back up just a little bit. But all that to say, Cat and Ant together combined in this game, shooting 29 of 48 from the floor. They combined to shoot 9 of 13 outside the arc and 10 of 10 at the free throw line. It doesn't get more efficient. It just doesn't. They also combined for 8 assists. Yeah, they turned it over 7 times, but they had the ball in their hands a ton. Cat had the 12 rebounds. They each had 3 steals in this game. It's just phenomenal performances from each of them. And it really overcame their brilliance. And we'll talk about Nas and studs and duds. Nas actually the best. Nas had the best plus minus of the Wolves individual plus minuses of anyone on the team in this game. Nas was great off the bench. More on him in a minute. But the brilliance of Cat and Ant overcame some of the other issues the Wolves had. Some of the spottiness on the defensive glass, giving up 13 offensive rebounds to the Pacers. Yes, a few of those were in garbage time, but still, still 13 offensive rebounds is too many, right? Helping to overcome some of the sloppy play from the Wolves offense early and late in this game. It was Cat and it was Ant, and that was that. And a Halliburton-less Pacers team was, frankly, hapless at times against the Wolves. There were a couple stretches, second and third quarter, where it was just complete, both ends of the floor, snuffing a shot out, coming back the other way for an alley-oop or a corner 3. Like, just such impressive end-to-end basketball for these stretches that if it's that good and you get up by that much, you can afford to be a little sloppy on the ends, right? The beginning and the close, if you dominate the middle of the game in that way. Now, obviously, that can't happen all the time. But, I mean, I guess it could. Like, if you dominate to this level in the middle stages of the game, who cares, right? So that's kind of what this thing was. Like, if you look at the box score, it's ugly. But not ugly, it's maybe not as pretty as you'd expect it to be with an 18-point win. But that's where something like cleaning the glass comes in and says, hey, these garbage time, things don't really matter. But again, brilliance of Ant and Cat were the things that really stuck out. I want to do individual studs and duds. We'll talk Nas. We'll talk a little bit of rotation. I want to talk role players. Troy Brown, another good game. stepping up again in what, another, half game absence from Jaden McDaniels, just a, as I said, well-rounded performance ultimately for the Wolves in this one. So we'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. I mentioned earlier, there are tons of NFL games, Monday night games tonight, or I think one Monday night game tonight. You still got Thursday night. You've got Saturday games now. And then next Sunday's Christmas Eve. Monday, there's even a game on Christmas Day. Well, I guess it's Monday Night Football anyway. So, like, you've got 4 days a week. You've got at least one NFL game on. And now's a great time. Of course, basketball ramping up. Of course, you have Christmas Day, NBA action as well. 4 or 5 games on Christmas Day. And by the way, the FanDuel app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to continue the NFL season at FanDuel. Again, FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, let's close this thing out with individual studs and duds. We already talked a lot about Cat and Ant. I'm going to rattle their lines off again real quick. Cat had 40 and 12, shot 15 of 25, 2 of 3 outside the arc, 8 of 8 at the free throw line. Also had 4 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks in this game, was a plus 18. Ant had 37 on 14 of 23 shooting, 7 of 10 outside the arc. 7 of 10 outside the arc, 2 of 2 at the line for Ant, 4 assists. He did have 4 turnovers, 3 steals, and 2 rebounds for Anthony Edwards. He was a plus 17 in 34 minutes of this game. Another strong Anthony Edwards performance. Naz Reid is the third stud for me in this one. 17 points, 6 of 8 shooting, 3 of 5. He was 50, 40, 90 2 weeks ago, had a stretch where he was bad from outside the arc for 3-4 games. And now he's hot again. After the Dallas game Thursday, he knocked down a career high 7 threes, 3 more on 5 attempts in this game. 5 boards also for Naz, 17 and 5 for him. And it was a plus 25 in 27 minutes. I continue to be impressed with his mobility on defense. And, compare that to go back and watch, I'd like to go back and watch some Naz footage from his rookie season. He's obviously 40, 50 pounds lighter now. And is just so much more mobile defensively. Really, really impressive. And that continues to stand out to me about Naz's season thus far. Those are my 3 studs. A couple of quick additional shout-outs. Kyle Anderson had 10 assists in this game, only 2 turnovers in 23 minutes. He continues to be quiet in the scoring column. His roles kind of shifted around a little bit this year, but he was big, especially after the Jaden McDaniels injury when the Wolves wanted to play bigger. Slow-Mo has been very good, for stretches at the 3 this year. Overall, he hasn't been as impactful as last season, but 10 assists, really impressive from him. Conley had 5 and 9, 5 points, 9 assists, only played 24 minutes, was a plus 21, second best plus-minus mark on the team in this game for Mike Conley. Troy Brown Jr., another strong performance, 11 points, 4 assists in this game, knocked down 3 threes, hit a couple of buckets in garbage time, but he was good prior to that. Had I think 2 of his 3 threes actually were as the Wolves were kind of extending that lead and pushing it over 20 points. He was on the floor for a lot of that. Really impressive. 11 points, 4 assists, 1 board, 4 of 6 shooting, 3 of 5 outside the arc in just 16 minutes. And if McDaniels doesn't play, Monday night in Miami, I believe the Wolves are. I'll verify. Yeah, in Miami. I would see TBJ getting the start once again. I would imagine. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, quiet night again offensively. That's been a bit of a roller coaster this year, but he was solid defensively, and he's going to play more if McDaniels doesn't play. I guess he may end up getting the start if McDaniels doesn't play. And then as the Wolves did earlier this year, and McDaniels was out, and TBJ then I guess he started when Ant was out. But at any rate, both those guys are going to see their minutes increase if McDaniels misses another game. Once again, Shake Milton out of the rotation, ended up playing 5 minutes late in garbage time, but he has lost his rotation spot at this point, and a big part of it is Alexander Walker doing enough defensively. Troy Brown on both ends of the floor. Troy Brown was also really good defensively. Had a couple of really lockdown moments. There was one, I can't even remember who the Pacers player was, but he was playing great defense in the corner, and they had a really tough fadeaway long 2, and it was it's those shots that go in. And you wonder how the Wolves' team effective field goal percentage is so good, because it feels like teams are still making really tough shots against them. And it makes it kind of encourages me that, hey, this regression to the mean in terms of the Wolves' opponent effective field goal percentage may not be that drastic, because it still feels like teams are making crazy shots against Minnesota all the time. But maybe that's just a bias thing and I don't know. Maybe I'm overrating that factor, but it feels like it's still happening. I know that teams aren't shooting well in terms of wide open threes. Like, that's part of the potential regression to the mean. But as I spent a lot of time on, I think it might have been Thursday's show, on some level, like, there is something to that, right? These teams are rushing shots. They're shooting poor threes because the Wolves are not allowing corner threes against them. That's a topic for another day, but I thought that showed through in this game as well. Speaking of shooting the basketball, I'm going to throw the stats back up if you're watching on YouTube. I mentioned earlier the field goal percentage in this game. The Wolves shot almost 56% from the field and a scorching 60% from outside the arc. Cat, low volume for Cat, 2 of 3, but Cat, Ant, Troy Brown, and Naz Reid all shot greater than 50% from the field in this game. Alexander Walker was 1 of 2. McDaniels knocked down his only 3, a corner 3 that he made before he left with the injury. By the way, McDaniels was played really well before he got hurt again. He had the 5 points in the first half, but hit a tough bank shot at the end of the shot clock, which then he fell down and hurt his tailbone. And he had that corner 3 prior to that. So a strong game for McDaniels, and hopefully it's just a soreness issue, and the Wolves decided they didn't need him against a Halliburton-less Pacers team. Perhaps he'll play Monday. I mean, if Jimmy Butler plays for Miami, it'd be really nice to have Jaden McDaniels lineup. But anyway, Wolves shot the ball extremely well. The Pacers did not. The Pacers are 50% from the floor because they scored 70 points in the paint, but they were under 29% from outside the arc, 6 of 21. And again, credit the Wolves for getting into these guys' jerseys and making them take difficult contested shots from all over the floor. That is a credit to the Wolves defense. We cannot penalize the Wolves for playing strong defense, like for contesting shots, for being active on the perimeter. Like, that's, I don't think we should take anything away from them, for that, right? Like, it's a good thing, right? We can't penalize the Wolves for doing everything right on that end of the floor. I shouldn't say everything. They have 70 paint points, but you know what I mean? On the perimeter, doing so many things right. All right. That's really all I have for this one. I don't have any duds, by the way. Alexander Walker didn't shoot the ball well, but I thought he was good in this game. Gobert had a quiet night, 5 and 7 for him, 2 of 3 shooting, missed some free throws, but he wasn't bad. Like, nobody on this team played poorly in this game. Garbage time was sloppy, but it was garbage time. It's called garbage time for a reason, right? So yeah, no duds for this one, in this one for me. In terms of the Wolves' upcoming schedule, they have Miami Monday night, so that's tonight. The live postcast will be over at Locked On Sports Minnesota once again, so you can tune in. I believe we'll have Jack Borman from Candace Hoopus, editor-in-chief over there, joining Luke Inman to talk Wolves Heat. It's a 6:30 p.m. Central tip. If you can't watch the game, you can always listen on SiriusXM. That's our friends on the SXM app. You can listen to Alan Horton on the call for Wolves Heat. If you can't watch it, again, SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search Minnesota Timberwolves over there, and you can listen to that. We'll do the post-game pod, so live postcast tonight on Locked On Sports Minnesota. The audio will be right here on the Locked On Wolves audio feed. And then bright and early Tuesday morning, you'll have in your feed the the post-game podcast as well that I'll do after Wolves Heat. So another challenge for Minnesota. Assuming Jimmy Butler plays, he hit a big shot late in their most recent win. Bam Adebayo's been out for a while. Tyler Hero's been banged up. Some of the same guys that are typically hurt are hurt for Miami. The Wolves beat a Jimmy Butler-less Heat team earlier this season. Miami is currently 15-11 though, so they've been good. So it's obviously a difficult matchup. It's on the road. After the 1-game homestand, the emotional win Saturday, like, it's a tricky game. I haven't actually looked at the FanDuel line, but it wouldn't shock me if the Heat were actually, I doubt the Heat are favored, but it's probably a very close line in this one. Actually, I'll look it up real quick. Why not? I would expect this to be a narrow line just because Miami is so good, and the expectation would be that Jimmy Butler plays, I would think. Wolves are favored by 2 on the road to Miami, which is about what I would have expected. I should have guessed it, but that I would have guessed somewhere in the 1-3 range. So difficult game for Minnesota. Like I said, live post-game pod or live postcast on Locked On Sports Minnesota after the game, audio in this feed, and then also post-game pod Tuesday morning. On Wednesday, we'll dig some more into the peripheral numbers. I did not get into that statistic that I wanted to get into that I mentioned, the cleaning the glass stat that somebody, Matt Stegmeyer, pointed out on Twitter. So we'll get into that on Wednesday's show because it'll still be the case. The Wolves are still going to rank 1 in these categories. So that's a bit of a teaser for Wednesday. But the short version is the Wolves are the league's best offense against good defenses and the league's best defense against good offenses. It's like, what else do you want? It doesn't get any better than that. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday's show. Anyway, Wolves Heat tonight. Enjoy the game. Big thank you for watching. A big thank you for listening once again, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Of course, you can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.